We started last week by saying how amazing it is to be living in the times we're living. And I think having reflected on what happened in what's now Trump has been calling the 12-day war, I think we can realize how more amazing things were in that war. Unfortunately, close to 30 people in Israel lost their lives, sadly, and many, many hundreds injured. But the miracles that have come out have been just unbelievable. And this week's Parsha is pretty much about that. It's everything connects. Everything connects. There's only 87 verses in the Parsha. There's 3 mitzvahs, 3 positive mitzvahs. Very, very short Parsha, but it's actually the longest Parsha from the book of Shmois. After Parsha Shmois, which talks about the Shvatim, the tribes coming down, the 12 tribes, and the 70 people coming down at the end of Bereshis into the beginning of Shmois. And then it jumps to Moshe Rabbeinu very, very quickly. Now, Moshe is now almost at the end of his life. We've gone through the desert, and this Parsha jumps from last week's Parsha, which is still giving halachas, and as we're moving, we've gone just 2 years out of Egypt to the spies 2 weeks ago to now being decreed 40 years in the desert. In this week's Parsha, we jump 38 years. And so we'll talk about that. So in that respect, it's the longest Parsha in terms of time, because the Torah does not describe those 38 years with any detail whatsoever. It goes from one thing to the next. In 2 weeks' time, in 3 weeks' time, we'll learn in Matos Masa the journeys that we went through and how, it discusses where they went, but that's about it. But essentially, Parshas Chukas starts off with what we call a chok. A chok is a divine decree and ordinance that we don't understand. The ultimate chok, which is most of the beginning of the Parsha, is what's called the Para Aduma, the red heifer, which we'll discuss in a little bit of detail, but just very briefly, there's 3 types of laws that Hashem gives down. Edus, Mishpatim, and Chukim. So a chok, Chukim is the plural, that's beginning of this week's Parsha. Edus are testimonies that testify about historical events or some aspect of our connection to Hashem, our emunah. Many of the Eidos that we have are around Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim. Remember that Hashem took us out of Egypt. So those things that we remember something else, it's a testimony that we can give testimony to something that happened, fit into that category. The mitzvah of Shabbos. Hashem created Shabbos on the 7th day. After 6 days of creation, Hashem created Shabbos, as an example. Going out of Egypt, and some of the mitzvahs like tefillin, for example, and tzitzis, where we mention things about other events and other type of mitzvahs. Those type of mitzvahs all fit into Eidos testimonies. Then we've got mishpatim. Mishpatim are civil laws that most society, normal society, would come to. However, we do need to know that these are laws that Hashem put in place. Just like we don't understand the aspects of chukim, which we'll come to in a moment, we don't understand a lot of mishpatim and eidos either, because they are divine gifts to the Jewish people. Within the mishpatim, many of the sheva mitzvot b'nei Noach, the 7 laws that a non-Jew is supposed to keep, will fit into a lot of that in terms of the way society is run. To run a moral and just society, if people keep those 7 laws, then it works. And then finally, chukim. A chok is a mitzvah which people do not understand. We come to think about, we can try and work it out. We've got ways here, we can figure it out. But the primary chok, and this week's parsha called Chukas, being about this chok, is this red heifer, whereby we take a cow who is red, now not Ferrari red. You've all seen red cows. It's not allowed to have 2 hairs that are another color. It's never allowed to have work. It's got a whole range of halacha around this animal. It is slaughtered by Elazar HaKohen, Aaron's son, is nominated. So in other words, not the Kohen Gadol, but another Kohen is nominated to slaughter it. It is burnt in its entirety. They add to the burnt cow hyssop, and They take the ashes and add hyssop and water, and it's sprinkled on a person who's impure. Anybody who is I'll come back to what it means by impure, tame. Anybody who is pure has to do it. Somebody who's tahor, who's pure, is involved in the process. But anybody who gets involved in the process becomes impure themselves. And that's where the chok is. So a kohen comes along. Let's just go through some of that definition. A person comes in contact with a dead body. It only applies to a person coming in contact with a human dead body. Whether they touch the body or they're in the room with the body, they become what's called tamei mace, impure with the body. That person has to go through a 7-day purification process. On the 3rd and 7th day, they get sprinkled with these waters, and then they are able to then become pure and go on the Temple Mount. The whole controversy about whether we can or can't go on the Temple Mount is around this, because everybody is considered tamei mace. The rabbis put in place that anybody who lives outside of Israel has come in contact with a dead body. Kohanim, we train ourselves from when we're kids, we train our children not to go in contact with a dead body. But invariably, everybody has come in contact at some point. And therefore, we are all ritually impure. So the problem with going up on the Temple Mount is if you go onto the Temple Mount to those areas that are sanctified, the person who goes up there is subject to a punishment called kares, being spiritually excised. And so therefore, try and work out exactly where those areas on the Temple Mount is very difficult. So those people who go up say, we don't go into the Golden Dome, for example, because that's clearly where the consecrated area, the sanctified area of the temple was. So they go around the outside. According to some opinions, that's fine. According to others, we don't want to play with this kind of danger, therefore we don't go up. And that's the whole dispute. But people who go up will go in a mikveh for sure to get rid of other tumah. But tamei mace, spiritual impurity from coming in contact with the dead, we can't get rid of without a paraduma, and we don't have a red heifer right now. Yeah. So there's been many of people over the last few years, there's been quite a few that people identify. Oh, here's a perfect red heifer. They watch it, and this could be a paraduma. Unfortunately, we didn't merit to get that just yet. But in order for when Moshiach comes and the temple will be rebuilt, there will be the final red heifer that will be there so we can get sprinkled and then go up. So the kohen and the people involved with the whole process sprinkle the tamei person, and they themselves become impure. They become tamei, but only for one day. It's a different level, but they can't go up. So you got a kohen who's involved in the process. He becomes impure. He purifies the other person, and that's what is so hard to understand. How does this work? We don't know. Hashem did it. And King Solomon, the wisest of all people, said he tried to understand it. He thought he understood everything, and he still didn't understand the depths of this mitzvah. It is just incredibly deep and it's a secret that Hashem kept from us. In fact, it's a chok. This Torah says you've got no right to question what it is. And other chukim, there's a number of other chukim that the Torah says, well, you shouldn't question these either. One is yibum. Yibum is where we've discussed previously where a man dies childless. His brother needs to marry the wife in certain circumstances. We do not do this today. There is a way of doing chalitza where he releases the wife, but we're not permitted to ask the logic of that. How does that work? That's for Hashem to know. The other one is shatnez. We've discussed that previously a number of times, where we're not allowed to wear wool and linen mixed in a garment together. There's many explanations, and we try and explain these things, but that's not for us to play with. The Sal Azazel, the he-goat that's sent off on Yom Kippur, we've got 2 goats that are chosen. They look alike, same height, they look the same, they kind of look like brothers. One, and we draw lots with them in Yom Kippur. One is taken and slaughtered and given to Hashem, and the other one is taken out of Yerushalayim and killed, thrown off a cliff. We're not allowed to ask what the point of that is. That is called the Sal Azazel, the he-goat that goes off to Azazel. And then the final one is the paraduma, the red heifer. So as I said, the ashes of this red heifer purifies a person who's impure and makes a person who's pure impure. Those four categories or those four halachas are something that's well beyond our human brains to fully understand. The wisest of all people didn't understand some of these things, particularly the red heifer, and therefore it's not for us. Moshe Rabbeinu was given all the gifts of understanding at the 49th level of understanding. He understood it all, but it's not for the rest of us. And so it's something that has a very, very deep message to us that Hashem runs the world. There are lots of things we don't understand. Our job is to try and understand as best we can on what happens in the world. But at the end of the day, there are things that are beyond us. Everybody is different, but each of us can understand certain things. And at some point in time, we need to say, I don't get it. Hashem's in charge. It's quite clear that there is something well beyond my understanding of the way things work. And we'll come back to this later on. Very, very interesting. And, it's quite a long section in the Torah. It is 22 verses, discussing the nuances and the nitty-gritty details of exactly what's done. The Gemara in various places discusses it. It's a very complicated process with lots and lots of specific laws that I think are beyond the scope of our shir. But please God, we should have one soon, just to remember that it is something that Hashem decreed, and it is something that we know and pray. We know that should happen, please God, very soon. And we look forward to the time when we can have the paraduma again, and we'll be able to ritually purify people so that we can actually serve Hashem the way the Torah describes and not the way we are able to serve in our times. The Torah then jumps. We're going to chapter 20. So it goes, chapter 19 is the paraduma. Chapter 20 of Bamidbar talks about the death of Miriam. So Miriam is Moshe's older sister. There was Miriam, Aaron, and Moshe. Miriam was a prophetess, and the Torah discusses her death. Basically, came to the wilderness of Tzin, the first month being the month of Nisan. People were in a place called Kadesh, and Miriam died. End of story. That was it. Miriam died. She was buried there, and suddenly there was no water. Remembering that for the last 40 years we'd had water from a rock. And Miriam died. And the people started complaining. And Hashem says to Moshe, go and talk to the rock. Go to the rock and talk to the rock, and you'll get water. The people complained. Moshe went to the rock, and he couldn't figure out which rock, the rock. There were lots of rocks that looked the same. And Moshe 40 years ago Hashem had said, strike the rock. This time Hashem said, take your stick and talk to the rock. So Moshe felt he needs to hit the rock. So he hit the rock, and a little bit of trickle of, according to Midrash, some blood came out. He hit the rock a second time. He got angry with the people, and blood came out. Some of the commentators say, and then Moshe and Aaron were now punished. Finally, even though we knew a few weeks ago that Moshe would not go into the land of Israel, Hashem says, no, this is it. This is the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. You and Aaron are not to go into the land of Israel. Commentators discuss as to the reasons for it. Rashi says he was told to speak to the rock, not to hit it. Didn't say, even though he was told take his stick, he said not don't take it. Rambam says that he was angry because of losing his temper. He gets punished for that. We need to control our temper. And Rambam said, Kiddush Hashem, there was holiness of Hashem was diminished to some degree because of for these reasons. Moshe was punished, and Moshe was now not allowed to go into the land of Israel. So clearly the connection between the water that was given to the Jewish people and Miriam, there was a connection. And so the rabbis learned that because of Miriam, in her merit, she was a prophetess. How do we know she was a prophetess? When before Moshe was born, Paro had decreed against the Jewish boys that they'll all be killed, but not against the girls. And Miriam's father, Amram, who was the leader of the generation, had separated from his wife. And Miriam came along and she said, so you are killing the girls and Paro is killing the boys because you're not allowing any children to be born. So Amram got back together with his wife, and Moshe was born. So there was pure prophecy. And she waited by the well, by the river when Moshe was put in the basket in the teva, in an ark, in a box, really. We say basket, but it was really a box. In the waters of the Nile, she waited for Moshe. And so Miriam was a prophetess, and in her merit, we had the water. We also had the clouds of glory. The Jewish people were completely surrounded by clouds, protecting them, flattening out the desert for them, preventing them from being attacked from snakes and scorpions, which we'll learn a little bit about shortly. And in Aaron's merit, we got the clouds of glory. We're completely protected because of Aaron. And Moshe, the other gift we got in the desert was the man, the food that we ate. And in Moshe's merit, we got the man. And so the water stopped. Moshe goes, he hits the rock, water comes out. And the way the water worked was, it was like a river through the middle of the camp. And each tribe where they were camped had their own rivulet or tributaries coming off. And everybody pretty much walked outside your door and took a cup of water out of this purest water imaginable, was available at all times for them, except for this little short time when they complained. So this place where they complained is known as Me Meriva, waters of strife. There was strife at the water. Miriam had died, and Moshe and Aaron made a mistake, and they were now punished not to go into Israel. The Jewish people get their water back. But we have just jumped, that whole episode jumped us 38 years. Okay, the Parsha continues. The first 2 years we were leaving Egypt, going through the sea, getting to Sinai, and then we're at Sinai pretty much, where we built the Mishkan. Yes, a few weeks ago we learned when we left from Sinai and we started moving. And it was all of an 11-day journey from Sinai to Eretz Israel that took us 38 years. Well, we were stuck at Sinai because of the Golden Calf for 2 years, or almost 2 years, and then we left. And the Jewish people move along. Aaron and Moshe are now punished, and we're moving along, and suddenly, when we're at a weak point, guess who attacks us? Amalek. Amalek comes along. Sorry, one moment. Yes. We approach Edom, and we ask Edom if we can cross through his land. We say, we're not going to take any water, we're not going to use your vineyards, we're not going to go through your fields, just stick on the road. And Edom refuses to let us cross through. Now, Edom is, Yaakov had two sons, Esav and Yaakov. Let's try again. Yitzchak had two sons, Esav and Yaakov. Esav is the grandfather of Edom. Edom being Rome, essentially. Edom becomes the Roman Empire, which, as we discussed previously, becomes the Western world. I think we discussed that last week. So we're at the point of Edom where they are right now, and Edom refuses to let us through. Moshe sends a message to the king saying, look, we're both from the family of Abraham, we're related, we're close cousins, please let us through. And Edom refuses. But we decide we're not going to walk through the land, we'll go around. Hashem takes us around the outside. So Edom doesn't let us through, and we then get attacked by Amalek. Amalek, dressed as Canaanim. The Torah even actually says that Vayishma HaKanani Melech Arad, the Canaan king of Arad who dwelled in the south, heard that Klal Yisrael had come by, he heard about the spies, and he started a battle against us. And we had this war against these Amaleks, and unfortunately we won the battle. Now I'm missing something in the Parsha, and that's why I keep turning around. Something that I can't see, which is really weird. Also in this Parsha, and unfortunately I just can't see it right now, but Aaron passes. Oh, here we go. It was just before Amalek attacked. That's why it was at the top of the page. They journey from Kadesh. The Jewish people are moving along, and Hashem says to Moshe, take Aaron, take Elazar his son, go up to this mountain called Mount Hor Har. Go up to this mountain and take Aaron up there. He takes Aaron up there. Hashem says Aaron is now due to die. He was 83 years old, and Aaron's gathered into his people. Moshe takes Aaron's garments as the Kohen Gadol, and he dresses Elazar his son as the next Kohen Gadol, and Aaron dies on the mountain. Moshe did as Hashem commanded. He went up to Hor Har before the entire assembly. He stripped Aaron of his vestments, dressed Elazar in them. Aaron died there at the top of the mountain. Moshe and Elazar came down from the mountain. When the entire assembly saw that Aaron had died, they wept for Aaron for 30 days. And it says there, Kol Beis Israel, the entire house of Israel, all the Jewish people mourned for Aaron, because Aaron was known as a person who was Roidev Shalom. Ava Shalom v'Roidev Shalom. He loved peace and he chased after peace. If he saw two people arguing, fighting, disagreeing, he was the peacemaker. He came and mediated. He'd go to the one person and say to them, I know you're having a little bit of a disagreement with this other person. He wants to make up. And he'd go to the second guy and he said, I know you're having this disagreement. The other guy wants to make up. And he created a path of peace for them. He was able to open up and allow the Jewish people to make peace whenever they were having a disagreement. And people loved him for that, because they realized that there was no point in fighting.
Did he stutter?
No, Moshe was the one who had a speech impediment, but that disappeared. That was only when he was younger. Once everybody got to Har Sinai, any defect that anybody had was corrected. Hashem cleaned up everybody. So those who were lame, those who were deaf, those who were blind, had Moshe's speech impediment was all cleaned up. We don't hear that again. Okay, then we get to Amalek attacking, and dressed as Canaanim. And we have a battle with them, and we win the battle, and we sing a song. The song of the book of the wars of Hashem. We sing this song, one of 10 mystical songs that we sing. Several of them are mentioned in the Torah, some in the prophets. The famous one is Az Yashir, that we say every day. That was when we crossed the sea. This is a much shorter song, but it thanks Hashem for the things that he did for us. When we then move on, and Aaron is now dead, Miriam is now dead, Moshe is leading the Jewish people. The Amalekis have attacked us, dressed as Canaanim, as we said. We sing the song, but in the process of all this, the people start complaining again. And Hashem says, this is enough, and he sends snakes to attack the people.
Oh.
So it's enough. You're talking badly, a snake needs to come and sort you out. And Hashem says to Moshe, take a copper snake, make a copper snake, put it up on a pole. We all know the sign of medical society, the snake on a pole. That's the source of it. He says, put this up on a pole. The people will look up at this and they will be saved from death from the snake bites. Looking at a pole is not going to help people. And it's very similar to the first war we had with Amalek, where Moshe went up on a mountain. He sent Yeshua with a limited number of soldiers out to battle. Moshe stood on the mountain, and the Torah says there, when Moshe's hands were lifted up, we were ascendant in battle, and as soon as his hands dropped, we started losing the battle. And he got very weary, and he sat on a rock, and Aaron and Hur held his hands up, and the people could look at his hands. It's similar to this snake. Look up. What does it mean, look up? When you look up, you start thinking about Hashem. And then you'll daven to Hashem to help you. And when you daven to Hashem, he will save you, because you'll realize that everything comes from Hashem. That's the message in this copper snake. It was not about the snake saving people. It was about thinking about Hashem. Very similar to what we discussed a few weeks ago in Parshah of Tzitzis, where a person wears tzitzis with tzecheles, with the blue string. You'll look at your tzitzis, the color of the ocean, which is the color of the sky, which is the color of Hashem's holy throne, his throne that Hashem sits on. Whatever this means, this is very metaphysical. Hashem is not a person who sits on a throne, but we can picture Hashem sitting on a throne, and therefore we'll think about Hashem and we'll daven to Hashem by wearing our tzitzis, and that reminds us of the 613 mitzvahs, as we discussed there. The tzitzis adding up to 613 takes us up to looking at Hashem and thinking about the mitzvahs and then connecting to Hashem. Everything's about connecting. At the end of the day, our whole focus is on connecting to Hashem. I mean, this series we've called this Shirim, connecting to the Parshah. How do we connect to what's going on in the Parshah? That was the intention of the name of the Shirim. How can we, going through our everyday lives, make a connection to the Parshah, which will make that connection to Hashem? That's what it's really all about. So the copper snake comes and heals those people who are stricken with snake bites. And then we move along. And there was an incredible miracle. This Parsha is filled with battles. We're coming along and we come to the border of Edom and Moab, and they wouldn't let us through. And we reached the Amorim, and we were camped in this area where there was this narrow strip of land. And these people thought, oh, we'll jump in the mountains. There's this narrow valley. They'll sit on either side of the mountains. As we go through in the valley, they'll attack us from above. And ready to ambush us. They'll conceal themselves in the mountains and the caves, looking over us. And they were very close to each other. And Hashem created a miracle where he crushed the soldiers together. We didn't even cross properly into the valley. We didn't even have to fight in that battle. And it was a death trap. And we were able to win a battle without even being there. Then we sang the song, as I mentioned. And then the Parsha ends essentially with battles against the two giants, Sichon and Og. Sichon and Og were massive people who had taken over the countries of the Amorites. Sichon became the Sichon, king of the Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan. I'll come back to in a moment. So they had taken over. They were brothers. They were two giants. Og, we know from way back when in the Torah, was the person who had come to Abraham to tell him about Lot being captured in the war of the First World War, the war of the 4 kings and the 5 kings. Og was the one who had come and told Abraham to come and save Lot. And so, yes, he'd lived for well over 500 years. And so Sichon wouldn't let us pass through his land. Hashem had essentially hardened Sichon's heart, wouldn't let him do this. Hashem allowed us to attack him. We attacked Sichon and we took over that land. We then come to Og, and Og was a bigger giant, and Moshe was very, very scared of Og. The Torah discusses how big these people were. His crib was massive. It says that we know Moshe was 10 amas tall. In our language, and whether this is fully literal or not, but 10 amas is approximately 5 meters. That's a very big man. Now, was Moshe physically that tall, or was it showing how spiritually tall he was? I don't know. But either way, Moshe was a very big person. Both ways he was. And Moshe, it says, jumped up and he would reach Og's ankles. With his staff in his hand, which was 10 amas, that's how big this giant was. Again, allegory. And the Jewish people were scared. We were scared to attack Og and take over his place. But Hashem said, no, it's time to take him. Moshe didn't fear him. Moshe went and attacked him and was able to take Og out. So we were now on the other side of the Jordan, in what's today modern Jordan, essentially, maybe into a little bit of Syria, but that whole area on the east side of the Jordan River, we had now taken over, and we had taken over from these giants, these kingdoms who were mightier than even the Egyptians themselves, and we suddenly realized, oh, This is, Hashem is with us. And in fact, we say this every Shabbos and Yom Tov morning in Pesukei de Zimra. We say this in Pesach Seder night as part of Hallel. We call this the Great Hallel. Chapter 136 of Tehillim, of Psalms, which goes, Hodel Hashem ki tov kilam chasto, give thanks to Hashem because He's good, for His kindness endures forever. And a few of those lines in there, we talk about Hashem smote the Egyptian firstborn. He brought us forth in their midst with a strong hand and outstretched arm. These are all words that we know from the Seder. He divided the sea, caused us to pass through it. He threw Paro and his army into the sea. And each time we say a line, we end the line, Ki l'olam chasto, Hashem's kindness endures forever. And we add in there, Vayirog Malachim Adirim. He's to him who smote the great kings, Ki l'olam chasto, his kindness endures forever. The Sichon Melech HaEmori, so Sichon, the king of the Amorites. The Oeg Melech HaBashan, and Oeg the king of Bashan. V'nasan Artzam Nachala, Ki l'olam chasto. He gave us their land as our heritage, a heritage for us. Nachala Yisrael Avdoi, as heritage for his servant Israel, the Jewish people. Shiflenu Zachal Lanu Ki l'olam chastoi, a heritage for Israel. In our lowliness, He remembered us. In our lowliness, He remembered us and released us from our tormentors. And we end Noisen Lechem Kol Basa Ki l'olam chastoi. He gives food to every single being, to all flesh. His kindness endures forever. Give thanks to the God of the heavens. So we recognize what Hashem has done for us. From taking us out, and this goes well before this, but from taking us out of Egypt, from taking us through the sea, through the desert, through all of these battles with these mighty kings, and even down to giving us our food. We said before that in the merit of Moshe we got the man, but we need to know that Noisen Lechem L'chol Basar, He gives nourishment to all flesh. Hashem is there to nourish us at all times. Whatever we do, however we do it, everything comes from Hashem. And interestingly enough, the last verse of the Parsha, as we've said before, the chapters and verses are not from Jewish origin, but the last verse of the Parsha is actually the first verse of chapter 22. The rest of chapter 22 is in next week's Parsha, but the last verse basically says that the Jewish people journeyed and camped in the fields of Moab on the bank of the Jordan opposite Jericho. Ready to go. We can see Jericho, straight opposite us. We're ready to go in. So, and that ends a very short but very long Parsha. We'll put it that way. So much to this Parsha, it is incredible. But the main thing of this Parsha, the main four things, I guess, in the Parsha is the Parah Aduma, the red heifer, that this chayk that we just don't understand. The death of Miriam, the loss of the well, the sin of Moshe and Aaron by Moshe hitting the rock, the death of Aaron included in that, transitioning from going to the midnight to get to Eretz Israel, the death of Aaron and loss of the clouds, as I said, the serpents, the copper snake, the song, and all these wars that we had to battle. Where we're shown in some of these wars how Hashem just comes along and wipes the people out without us having to raise a spear. And in other cases we have to battle, but we're able to win these wars with Hashem's guidance behind the scenes at all times. We sing this incredible song at the well. And so I just want to look a little bit into what we've experienced over the last few weeks, we being the Jewish people. We saw in the sixth Parsha with Edom that Edom didn't want to let us through. We backed off and we went around. We don't want war. It's not about us. There's no ways we want to fight a war where we lose people, where other people are lost. I mean, we just need to look at what's happened since Simchas Torah 20 months ago, in that it was a horrific day on the 7th of October for the people of Israel. more than 1,200 people killed, communities devastated, tens of thousands of people displaced, and a war after that we did not want. But we had Hamas attacking us. Now, Hamas jumped the gun. Their plan, it seems like, has come out now was Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, the Syrians would all attack together. And Hamas jumped the gun. Why they jumped the gun, Hashem decreed it. It's quite simple. We're then having this war, and then Hezbollah started, and the Houthis keep sending their one missile at a time to distract us. But if we look at what's happened, Hamas has essentially been decimated. Unfortunately, they still hold 50 hostages. Sadly, many of them are no longer with us, but we've been recovering bodies slowly. Gaza itself is absolutely devastated. There is nothing really left of this place called Gaza. Gaza has a border on the south. I mean, we keep hearing in the press, I'm going over stuff everybody knows, but we keep hearing in the press how Israel's blockaded Gaza before this war, and this apartheid state and all of this stuff. Gaza has a border, a pretty significant border with Egypt. Egypt blocked the border. More Gazans were coming into Israel every day than have ever been to Egypt. Tens of thousands, correct. And yet the only people who are blamed are Israel. You look at Israel, and we've got fair elections for anybody who's an Israeli citizen. Doesn't matter who they are, Jew, Arab, Druze, Christian, doesn't matter who they are. If you're an Israeli citizen, you vote in the election, and there are Arab parties in the Knesset. There's not a single Jewish person in any of the Arab lands that's allowed to even vote. Maybe in Iran they're allowed to, but there's no voting in Iran. But there are 50,000 Jews who are actually now struggling, unfortunately. But yeah.
50,000
approximately
in Iran.
Apparently so, yes.
Wow.
Yes, or maybe 50 is more. Maybe it's less than that now that I think about it. But still, there's thousands of Jews in Iran. Many of them have been arrested. People have been killed. Yep, Iranians that are born there that, for whatever reason, and publicly they do support the regime. Whether they actually support the regime or not, but they have had to say many times that they support them. Many have been able to get out over the years, thankfully. Iran had a very significant Jewish population in the 50s and 60s, until 76. And had a the Iranian Jewish people were a very influential group in Iranian society. So, Hezbollah, we had the incredible miracle of the pages and the walkie-talkies exploding. Where did all this come from? I mean, just unbelievable what has happened. And you look at slowly, the Houthis, yes, they've been sending missiles and interrupting us one missile at a time, but we've been able to essentially eliminate most of what they can do. Hamas did send one missile into Israel the other day. A couple of them exploded inside. A few of Hezbollah continuing. The Syrian regime has been ripped out and replaced, so much so that they're now talking of joining the Abraham Accords, the new Syrian regime. He was a terrorist, but he's flipped. The Saudis look like they're coming back. It seems like one of the reasons Hamas pulled the trigger early was Israel and Saudi Arabia were very close to joining in the Abraham Accords. And therefore, Hamas pulled the trigger. All of this is clearly pointing to Hashem directing the way of the world. We come along, and 3 weeks ago now, Israel decided to bomb Iran. I try to pull up some statistics of that, what Trump has now called the 12-day war.
Daddy called it.
Yes. If you just look at what happened, 12 scientists, 20 senior commanders were killed on the first day almost simultaneously. How on earth does a country get in and figure these kind of things out? They suffered losses of civilians, military people, anybody involved directly. Israel had taken out their air defenses previously in previous attacks. They had sent 300 missiles twice at Israel. One had got through previously, which had shrapnel had killed one Gazan who had escaped from Gaza. And he was running around somewhere in the Shomron. I think near Hebron from memory. Yeah. There's miracle after miracle after miracle that we're seeing. Israel flew something like 1,200 sorties from Israel, 12,000 to 1,200 to 2,400 kilometers away, refueling planes.
In the air.
One drone was shot down. An unmanned aircraft. That was it. They were completely flying around Tehran. You saw video of people in Tehran filming the Israeli warplanes flying around completely at their will, doing what they wanted to do, taking out generals. It says here there were more than 180 airstrikes in Tehran alone, but they were precision airstrikes. The interesting one for me was the one that they took out the door of the prison, so that the prisoners in there who were anti the regime could escape. Did they or didn't they? We don't know. Well, I don't know.
But there must be a reason.
Yeah, of course, to try and let them escape. So Iran sent over 500 missiles. I think there's about 570 missiles. 60 missiles or interceptors got through. Unfortunately, a number of them hit buildings, direct hits. We look at what happened with the Soroka hospital. Direct hit on a ward in the hospital. That was cleared out of patients and staff the day before.
Yeah.
One day before, they decided it may be a bit risky to keep people here because it takes too long to get them into a shelter. You've got people in hospital that are not well. It takes too long to get them into a shelter. So they moved all of those people less than 24 hours before this missile hit. So 60, yes, unfortunately, I think it was 29 people died in Israel as a result. And that is a tragedy beyond tragedies, because one life is a tragedy. But 483 were intercepted, 60 got through. That's unheard of. The fact that we had 300 previously and one got through, or nearly 600, twice 300, and one got through, or the fact that the Houthis have been sending missiles all the time, every day another missile, and the only thing that gets through is shrapnel. And yes, many soldiers sadly have been killed. There was another one overnight. There was 7 3 days ago. It is tragic that we have this. But we just look, Trump gave them 60 days. The Iranians are pushing. And we look what Israel did on the 61st day, they go in. They took out all their commanders. I've seen charts. I was trying to find a chart this morning of who they took out. I couldn't find one very quickly. But the top echelon, except for the top guy, were all pretty much taken out.
Now why? This is interesting. Why didn't they take him out?
Hashem didn't want him to be taken out. Maybe the next guy is going to be worse. I don't know. We don't know. We'll find it. We'll find out. We will find out one day. It is miracle after miracle we are witnessing with our own eyes. Now, let's just go back. Trump has called this the 12-day war. In 1967, we were attacked. Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, en masse. And that was a war we should have lost, no question about it. And in 6 days, we won that war. I've heard stories of commanders of tank brigades. They had tanks which were not, you couldn't even really call them tanks. They were pre-Second World War vintage, many of the tanks, and yet we're able to overcome these greatest armies in the world. In 73, the Yom Kippur War. Now, Yom Kippur War we should have lost, and we were losing. We were losing very, very badly, unfortunately. But we had tanks. I heard a story last night of a tank commander who said the tanks they had 4 tanks in his little group. They could not climb the Golan Heights. They didn't have enough power just to get up the Golan Heights, and yet they got up. And a few Israeli soldiers were able to retake the Golan Heights. In 67, we had taken the Temple Mount. We were on the Temple Mount. We had taken Hebron and every other area. And unfortunately, we did not merit to hold them. And the Jordanians were given control of the Temple Mount. For whatever reason, Hashem didn't want us to have it at the time. They argue politically, whatever. There's a whole range of discussion as to who was at fault. At the end of the day, Hashem didn't want us to have it because we didn't merit it. But if we look back, it's after 67 was the time that the whole Baal Teshuvah movement started. You had young students pretty much people who were born post Second World War, who are now suddenly finding Hashem, the Osamachs and the Esha Torahs of the world, suddenly started. All these yeshivas, and suddenly people in Israel, in America, in other countries, it took a little bit longer to filter through. But through the 70s, this massive return of people, Baal Teshuvah, people who have come back. A massive return of people have come back to Judaism, which post-Holocaust we had essentially lost a lot of people to Yiddishkeit. I mean, a lot of it, we've lost more people in America to Reform and Conservative, marrying out and various other things, than we lost in Holocaust. They say there's no such thing as a third generation Reform Jew, because by the third generation, they're one of a few things. They're either married somebody who's not converted properly, or married out, or they've become Orthodox. One of those three things has happened. And it's very hard to find third generation, because anything that's not based on MS, that's based on sheker, because Reform is a sheker. I grew up in it. I know what it's about. Falsehood. So MS is truth. That's a lie. Yeah. We say that the word MS, Aleph Mem Tes, Aleph Mem Tov, Tes. Let me try again. MS is all three letters stand on 2 feet. They all stand upright on 2 feet. It stands, it's firmly anchored onto the ground and into the ground. Sheker, Shin Kuf Reish, is 3 letters. Shin comes to a point, Kuf comes to a point, and Reish is a single letter. You can knock them over easily. MS and MS also, that says Aleph, the beginning all the way to the end. The whole Aleph base is covered through those 3 letters. Sheker are 3 letters that are next to each other, right at the end. So it's easy to knock sheker over, but it does take hold. Now, we've spoken about a little bit about Iran, but at the end of the day, what was Iran's plan? Iran's plan is to acquire nuclear weapons, to wipe Israel out. One nuclear bomb will wipe out the whole of Israel. I was thinking about this. You keep hearing this from commentators, from rabbis all the time, that they were ready to wipe out Israel. What would have happened if a nuclear bomb lands in the middle of Israel? Every single one of these people that call themselves Palestinians would have been wiped out at the same time. Iran and the rest of the Arab world does not care about these people. And that's proven because Egypt wouldn't let them in. Because Jordan, who are essentially, we do have a 2-state solution, by the way. That was set up in 1948. Jordan and Israel, 2 states. And most of the Jordanians are Palestinians. At the end of the day, there are people who were moved by the Ottoman Empire into that region. The vast majority of Arabs have no connection to the land of Israel. They were brought in from various parts of the Ottoman Empire from the mid to late 1800s. When the Jews started coming back, the Turks felt, we need to keep a balance of Arabs and Jews. We've got to have more Arabs than Jews here. We can't be taken over. And so they brought people in from North Africa, from other Arab countries, to keep their balance. Those people have very limited, if any, connection to the land of Israel. And so we've seen this sheker being played out over and over and over again. And Iran has been the one constant that's been pushing globally, infiltrating the universities. Through that, infiltrating the mainstream media, as they're called, that have become foreign. It's just an incredible contrast. They become more and more and more left-wing, woke, and at the same time more pro-Arab fundamentalism, because it's anti-Jewish. So the woke left-wing, they've got a common enemy being us at the end of the day. And you just hear some of these commentators, the drivel that comes out of their mouth, it is scary. Now, thankfully, there are still some sane commentators who at least are able to push back. But they've infiltrated the minds of the youth. And it's very scary. And this is all from this power called Iran that has been developing a nuclear weapon. And what has Israel done? Some years ago, Israel was able to, let's go back. In the 80s, Israel took out Iraq's ability to have a nuclear weapon. Yeah. They took out their nuclear facilities, mid-80s. Comes 1991, and 1990, Iraq invades Kuwait. America goes into the first Gulf War. Had Iraq had a missile then, nuclear weapon, they could well have used it. Saddam Hussein was a megalomaniac who was out to control whatever he could. And so then did the world thank Israel? I don't believe they did. But Syria was trying to develop a nuclear weapon. Israel took that out. Comes now, and Iran is very far ahead. In 2008, Israel was able to steal the plans that they had. Now, they weren't able to steal the originals and the copy. They just were able to get the copy, or the original either or. Now they've been able to get the rest of it from it now, as well as take out most of the nuclear scientists, as well as taking out their ability to make nuclear weapons. Now, refined uranium, well, who knows? But at the end of the day, in order to have nuclear power, you need to enrich uranium to a few percent. They were enriching uranium to about 60% or 70%. You need about 90% for a weapon. So they had gone significantly over what they needed for nuclear power. Nuclear power is a drop of enrichment compared to where they got to. And so Israel with the US had to act. Now, Trump comes along with these B-2 bombers, with these bunker-busting bombs. The only country in the world that's ever developed these bombs will not sell them. It's the only weapon America will not sell to the world at all. They control them. And along comes Trump and he takes out these facilities. Did he? Didn't he? Were they obliterated? Were they not? Got no idea. But there's been one constant throughout this whole process. And that constant, well, there's two, but one is driving the other. Hashem is driving the other one. Throughout everything we've seen in this war has been an organization called Mossad, which we don't see. But as we said, took out the pages of Hezbollah, the walkie-talkies. I mean, who would ever dream up these kind of things? It's just incredible. And they had 10 years, they were waiting for this to be used and put in play. Yep, they knew about it. They've been working on it for 10 years. Now, what has gone viral in the last few days is a person called Catherine Perez Shaktam. So who is she? She's a spy. It's the only thing we can say about her. The stories, I've watched videos about her. I've read articles about her. It came to me last week. Somebody sent me something and it just looked too hard to believe. And I read it and let me go and do some research. And I've spent a bit of time trying to research her and I still can't figure out exactly who she is. But I thought, let's just talk a little bit about, I'll come to who she is now. I'll talk about her in a few minutes. I've downloaded an article about her from, I don't even know where this is from. That's a picture of her. Yeah, no, she's known now.
No, I know.
So there, that's what she looks like. So she is a French-born secular Jewish woman. She was born to a secular family in France. Let me read through some of this. It's by Gila Isaacson. It was written on June 27th. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It says a 5-minute read. Mossad's master spy, how Catherine Perez Shaktam infiltrated Iran's elite. When did all this happen? I've seen articles that she escaped Iran as soon as Israel started bombing 3 weeks ago. But I've also seen articles that she's written in the last few days and a few weeks and months ago. So it seems like, according to this one, it seems like it was about 2021 when she was discovered. But let's read through some of the things just in this article. It's headed up straight out of Hollywood. And there will be movies about her. Now, I don't know if you've heard of Eli Cohen. Eli Cohen, most people know it. He infiltrated Syria, became the minister in the Syrian government. She is the next Eli Cohen, but she has, living more likely than not living in Israel with extreme security and doing incredible work. Okay, so there are reports alleging that Catherine Perez Shaktam, a French-born journalist of Jewish descent, infiltrated Iran's highest echelons as a Mossad agent, orchestrating a covert operation that dealt a severe blow to the Islamic Republic's entire security apparatus. According to multiple sources, including an article published by Organizer on June 26, 2025, I actually read that article as well, her audacious mission involved years of deception, leveraging her persona as a Shia Muslim convert to gain unprecedented access to Iran's political, military, and religious elite, including the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. May he burn in pieces. Her alleged activities have sparked a nationwide manhunt in Iran, with authorities executing at this point 3 men suspected of collaborating with her and issuing public warnings to report suspicious activity. They arrested many, many Jewish people. And at last I saw, I think 10 had been executed. Her journey into Iran's inner circles began with a carefully crafted identity. Born into a secular Jewish family in France with a maternal grandfather who fought the French resistance and a paternal grandfather who survived the Holocaust. She studied psychology at the University of London, and I actually saw an interview with her this morning. I just watched a little bit of it, and she speaks English with quite an English accent. Later postgraduate studies in finance and communication. While in London, she married a Yemeni Sunni Muslim. Now remember, the Muslims split soon after Muhammad's death into the Sunnis and the Shias. And they hate each other. And a lot of that hatred between each other is what keeps us going. Yeah. Well, if they hate each other, they'll fight with each other and leave us alone. And that's happened over many centuries. Okay, she converted to Islam for her marriage, but it ended in divorce in 2014. In 2017, she resurfaced in Iran, publicly now identifying as a Shia Muslim. So she went from being a secular Jew to marrying a Sunni, converting to Islam, and now coming out as a Shia Muslim, expressing intellectual curiosity about the Islamic Republic's ideology. Under the guise of a Western journalist, she wrote for prominent Iranian outlets, including the Tehran Times, and lists a few others here, and even Khamenei.ir, the official website of Iran's supreme leader. Her articles often praised the Islamic Revolution and critiqued Western policies, earned her trust amongst the elite. She reportedly met with high-ranking figures, including presidential candidate at the time, Ebrahim Raisi, in 2017, whom she interviewed for Russia Today, and other generals, former head of the IRG, Quds Force, etc. According to reports, her charm and fluency in blending into Iran's revolutionary circles allowed her to forge close relationships with the wives of officials, military officers, and scholars. These connections reportedly provided her with detailed information about their husbands' movements, residences, and schedules, which she allegedly relayed to the Mossad. Her covert activities included discreetly photographing sensitive locations, collecting classified data, which facilitated precise Israeli strikes on Iranian targets. The organizer report claims that Peres Shachtam's intelligence was instrumental in enabling Israel's highly accurate attacks on Iranian military and nuclear sites, particularly during June 2025 offensive. This was written last week. Mossad agents supported by her information reportedly smuggled precision-guided weapons and established a drone base near Tehran, which we now know about, targeting air defenses, ballistic missile launches. These operations crippled Iran's ability to mount a counterstrike, with key figures like the Armed Forces Chief of Staff, the IRGC Chief of Staff, and the head of their missile and aerospace divisions killed in the strikes. Why on earth does Iran need an aerospace division if all they are developing is nuclear power? It's quite clear. You need to be blind to not see this. Iran's intelligence agencies caught off guard launched an investigation that uncovered her alleged role. By the time her identity was confirmed, she had vanished, prompting a nationwide manhunt. Posters of her face are now displayed across Iranian cities, and authorities have executed 3 men accused of aiding her, including one identified as Esmail Fakhri, who was hanged for allegedly transmitting strategic information to Mossad. Iran's heightened paranoia has led to mass arrests, with dozens detained on suspicion of espionage, including Afghan refugees, raising concerns for human rights groups about potential pretextual crackdown on dissenters. Peres Shachtam's story is not without controversy. In a 2022 interview with the Times of Israel, and she has written in the Times of Israel, I've seen several of her articles, she denied being a Mossad spy, dismissing the allegations as a reaction to her Jewish heritage and a shift away from supporting Iran's regime. After her divorce, she publicly reconnected with her Jewish identity, identifying as a Zionist and writing for pro-Israel outlets like the Times of Israel. She claimed her earlier work for Iranian media was a phase of self-hate, in quotes, and that her presence in Iran was purely journalistic, facilitated by her French nationality and past marriage to a Muslim. However, her 2021 blog post the Times of Israel detailed her meetings with Iranian leaders and her access to sensitive information fueled suspicions in Iran, leading to the removal of all of her articles from state media. She'd written for the state. Critics, including Iranian media and 2022 Mint Press News investigation, argued that her work with Wikistrat, an Israeli-American intelligence firm, and her high-level access to Iran suggests deep ties to Israeli intelligence. While Parshas Chukas has ridiculed the idea of being a non-Farsi-speaking French citizen recruited by Mossad, historical precedents of foreign-born agents working undercover for Israel lend credibility to the allegations. The revelations have sent shockwave through Iran, exposing vulnerabilities in a security apparatus. Former President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, as we call him, claimed in 2021 that even the head of Iran's counter-Mossad unit was an Israeli agent, a claim echoed by former intelligence minister Ali Husseini's warning that Mossad is closer to us than our own ears. The recent executions and arrests reflect Iran's desperate attempt to regain control amid fears of further infiltration. Internationally, the story has been likened to a spy thriller, with outlets like News 18, India.com, and latestly describing her mission as one of the boldest in Israeli intelligence history. On X, posts have celebrated her as a daring operative, with some calling her the Israel's Black Lady or Lawrence of Persia. Perek Shadam's current whereabouts are unknown, with speculation she may have assumed a new identity. Her alleged role as Mossad's most adventurous and dangerous spy has left Iran reeling, its leadership humiliated, and the global intelligence community in awe of the operation's audacity. As Iran continues its crackdown and Israel remains silent on the matter, the saga of Catherine Parshas Chukas is a fascinating example of the shadowy, high stakes of espionage in Iran's war against Israel. Thank you very much. She's just got a new name.
Can Iran still finance all these terrorist
we will wait and see. At the end of the day, if you think about historically what happened, Obama had given them free rein. Trump came along in his first presidency. Trump number 45 came along and cut that off and put sanctions on them. And they went back, and Biden pulled all out. Since in Biden's term, all of their finances came through. I saw a report that said every single ship in the world has got tracking. You can go on websites and see where any ship is. The Iranians have what they call ghost ships, oil tankers, that they fill up in Iran. They send them off somewhere off the coast, somewhere of China, of Southeast Asia, somewhere. Another oil tanker meets them in the sea and fills itself up and goes off to a refinery. So yes, do they still have money? Yes, they do. But if the world realizes what they're doing, there will be a crackdown, and Trump will do his utmost to stop that again. And so yes, can they finance it? There's billions or tens of billions of dollars of oil coming out of Iran. Does the country need to normalize? That needs to be the goal of the Western world. Bring them back. We saw it in Syria, how almost overnight the Syrian regime was thrown over after killing millions and millions of their citizens. Now, the Western press, we've spoken about them, what did they do? They turned a blind eye of what was going on in the civil war in Syria. Israel does one thing and the world goes crazy. Syria, Sudan, there's a civil war. There's civil wars across the world.
in Africa?
For sure, everywhere. But the world doesn't say much about it. That is because of who we are as the Jewish people, this tiny little group of people who Hashem looks after us. But we need to connect to Hashem. We need to look at this week's Parshah. The Chukim in this week's Parshah talks about Hashem is behind the scenes driving the world. Our job, and many of us, last week on Thursday, Friday last week was Rosh Chodesh. So people said Hallel in Shul. Very joyous Hallel, being thankful. But on Wednesday, there were many, many shuls in Israel and some around the world who said Hallel to thank Hashem for the miracles of this war, this 12-day war, where Israel was able to send 1,200 planes in without one of them being shot down. That's correct. And so what many shuls did on Shabbos, we had some form of Shabbos Hodah, Shabbos of thanking Hashem. Now, it's very hard when we have got 50 people still in tunnels in Gaza. where we lost 30 people and have thousands injured. It's very hard to have complete thanksgiving. But what we did was we said Psalm 100 in shuls, Mizmor Lasoda, a psalm of thanksgiving, because it says Haril Hashem Kol Haaretz, call out to Hashem, everyone on earth. Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha, serve Hashem with joy, with gladness. Bo lefanav birnana, come before Hashem with joyous song. That's what it's about. Thank Hashem for the little things we see. Know that Hashem, He's our God. It is true, it is He who made us, and we are His people. We need to recognize who we are, and we are the sheep of His pasture. Enter into the gates with His gates with thanksgiving. Go to Hashem and be thankful. His courtyards with praise. Give thanks to Him. Bless His name. Ki tov Hashem. Hashem is good. Le'olam chasto. Same words that we read, which is why I read Psalm 136, part of it. Hashem is good. His kindness endures forever. Va'ad dor vador imanasai, and from generation and generation is His faithfulness. Hashem is faithful to us throughout the ages. Just the fact that we are still here, we can see that Hashem has kept us going generation after generation. Where we have walked away from Hashem, He's still been there driving us. And as we came back in 67 and 73, and we had the Baal Teshuva movements then, it's up to us. And we've seen it in this war. We've seen how many people have started putting on tefillin, how many people are wearing tzitzis. They are still making tzitzis in various places across Israel for the soldiers and for others who have taken on mitzvahs just one step at a time, just to come back, to connect to Hashem. Our job is to connect, just to realize Hashem is there for us. We just need to be there for Him.